Before the next episode of X Job Downloaded starts, I have a big favour to ask. If you've enjoyed any of our episodes so far, please can you click on the follow button on your platform. I'm on Apple, Spotify, Google, Amazon and YouTube. It costs nothing to follow, but makes a real difference to me as a podcast producer. Thank you. This interview is being tape recorded. My name is Paul Maleary and this is X Job Downloaded. And today I'm going to interview Phil Noisy Norton. Now, Phil, I hope you don't mind me calling you Noisy, but that was your nickname in the job.
Bit harsh.
Yeah, I don't know why. I don't know how you got that nickname. Phil, thanks so much for coming in today, and it's lovely to see you after all this time. And you look
mate.
remarkably well.
Thank you.
Where did it all start? Where does Phil Norton come from?
Well, Phil Norton was born in 1964 in the grand borough of Southend. Southend boy, true and true. Family was a South London family, but came over when my father moved occupations and started working in Southend at an insurance broker. So that's where we were born and bred. Me, my two brothers and my sister. Born up in Eastwood, went to Eastwood schools, and then through we all went to Westcliff Grammar School.
Wow.
It's still a question in a lot of people's hearts of how I actually managed to get to grammar school.
I can understand.
I am not the most academic of people that you will meet in life. And so we started life, really great life, very good, solid family structure. Based in the local church as well. We were members of Eastwood Baptist Church. So, that was my upbringing. My parents.
Oh, was it really?
My parents were part of the church life and helped run the church. So church was in my blood from, well, as far as I can remember. So, brought up through Sunday school and things like that, and a boys' club called Covenanters, where that was an eye opener because it was a boys' club. Run by my dad Roy and his friend John Sterry and Tony Rouse. They all ran this boys' club, but it recruited a lot of young lads that were probably on the edge of society. Came from Eastwood in the old days, which were Eastwood Senior School. So it was a bit weird that a grammar school boy like me and my brothers would be, enjoying the company of a youth club, boys' youth club, old-fashioned, doing lots of things that they're probably not allowed to do now because of health and safety and risk assessments. But, it did us the world of good, and it did me the world of good to be, enjoying it, playing football with them, going to competitions, so it was a very good upbringing, but not very academic. So I realised quite quickly that I probably shouldn't stay on for A-levels in my grammar school years.
So what did you do?
Well, this is where my father, who absolutely amazing, he obviously realised that I'd talked in different ways about the police and stuff like that. I don't ever remember sitting down having a conversation, oh, Dad, I'd really like to be a police officer one day. I don't remember that. But he came to me one day when my mother and father probably had a conversation, what do you think? Do you think he's going to be allowed to stay on to the sixth form? What's his academic? Is he going to go to uni and all that? And they probably very realistically and very happily for me came to me and said, well, Phil, there is this thing called the police cadets. Which was an opportunity to leave school after what was fifth form. Now I think it's year 11, is it?
Yeah, 16 or 15.
So take your O-levels, but then that's just sort of that's over, and think about the police cadets. And that really appealed to me. So we started going through all the brochures. So we applied to Suffolk, Essex and the Met. Suffolk weren't recruiting at that time. So I was going through the process of going into the Met. So I was come up to the age of 17, and both of them I was going through the procedures, gone through all the fitness exam and the doctor's thing and the entrance exam, doing okay. And then the Met came back and said, congratulations, you've passed, you're in.
Brilliant.
You start. So I looked at my dad and went, oh my goodness, this is a real possibility. He said, well, what do you want to do? I said, well, I think I need to go for it. I want to try. This is completely out of my comfort zone, you know, away from home, away from everything I knew. Not really too sure, but hang on, I've been thrown a lifeline here. Why don't I go for it? So we made the decision. I said, yeah, okay, I'll do it. And September 1981, I joined the police cadets in the Metropolitan Police.
Brilliant.
I'd been there for about a week, maybe 10 days, and then a letter arrived at home from Essex Police. Congratulations, you've been accepted to Essex Police Cadets. You can start in January 1982. And I said to him, Dad, well, what do I do? He said, well, it's really up to you. And I said, well, I'm here now. I've sort of been here a week or so. I'm sort of not quite settled in, but why don't I stay and just give it a run? And that's what I did.
And where was here? You're at Hendon.
So at Hendon, yeah, in the old police cadet. So Hendon then in those days was a huge estate of gymnasiums, swimming pool, running tracks, the old driving school, skid pan, the detective training school, the police national computer was based there. Obviously the police training college, and it had its own hospital for all the people on site. Run alongside the old tube up to Colindale. So it's a huge place. Big drill square, all the accommodation that we needed, and it was just it was just a fantastic place to be. You know, I didn't really realise what I was joining at that point. Very young, very naive, Essex boy, plucked out of that life, thrown into London, and a lot of drill, a lot of sport, a lot of education as well, because we had to carry on our education. So I took another 3 O-levels, did really well as an ex-grammar school boy. I got 2 U's and an E. As you can think, that education at that point in that environment wasn't my priority.
No,
so
of course.
Learning how to march, learning how to play the side drum, doing judo every day, it was just incredible.
Fantastic.
But also starting to learn what is policing all about. So looking at police studies, looking at, some low-level laws and all that sort of stuff. So we were being prepared and being tested to see whether you might make young police officer status. So at Hendon for a year, then I went to Crystal Palace, stayed at South Norwood Digs for 6 months, and while I was there I did an attachment to the Clapham Rehabilitation Centre, which was absolutely eye-opening when looking after people with what we would probably call now special needs. I don't remember that term when I was that age. I remember meeting people that were various stages in life, whether it's through illness or mental conditions or medical conditions, just being their friends. And one of the stories that I cannot understand what on earth was going on. So I'm a young police cadet working at Clapham Rehabilitation Centre, 1982. Phil, can you take these 3 guys shopping in Brixton? And I remember saying, well, yeah, okay. Completely naive. So just got them. I think one was in a wheelchair. The other one was a guy that you sort of almost had to hold his hand. He was probably in his 30s, a big, strong guy. I don't know what his ailment is, but big and strong. And we're walking through like the back market in Brixton Market. I had no idea where I was, the tensions that were going on. This chap come up to me and offered me something called ganja, which I looked at the others and thought, what on earth is he talking about? He said, no, it's all right, mate, I'm just looking after these 3. And it was only later when I was chatting to my mates, this guy come up and they went, oh, you're an idiot. You're completely naive, wet behind the ears. You've got no idea of this big wide world. Do you know? So yeah, that was my start my police career. Then I went to Hendon. Did okay-ish, not great, scraped through. Went into central London then and served for a few years, did a few different things.
Whereabouts in central London?
So I went to a place called Canon Row, which is right next to Parliament. So literally it was, it probably still exists, the building, but if you think of where Scotland Yard is now, the new Scotland Yard, that is actually built on the back of the Canon Row police station.
It does still exist, I think, and I think that's where the DPG come out of, or certainly...
That would probably be right. Yeah. So I went there, again...
That's a nice central base as well.
Yeah, but they said, young man coming out of Essex, where do you want to go in London to police? All I said is, I'm not sure where I want to go, but where I don't want to go is central London, because I've come to be like a community guy. I want to help people, in the truest sense of the word. But I was thrown there, lots of parades, lots of stopping traffic because of VIPs were hurtling through things. But that was interesting.
And you're literally a few minutes walk from Horse Guards Parade.
Yes.
Trafalgar Square, Parliament Square.
Exactly.
So you'd have all the tourists. Can I have my photograph with you,
Buckingham
mate?
Palace.
Buckingham Palace, yeah.
Yeah. Excuse me, officer, who lives here?
Yeah.
That would be the Queen of England.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
What's the name of this building? Buckingham Palace. Oh, great. What street is that in? Oh, my goodness. Really? Why don't you just get out of my face, mate? But you didn't. You couldn't.
No,
it was always, this is the Mall.
Yeah.
What number? Number 1. Do you know, so it was a lot of touristy stuff, but it was in the evenings. It was, central London. We were, like you say, Trafalgar Square, Villiers Street, down to the Embankment.
Yeah.
There was a variety of work that we were rushing around doing.
Yeah.
Then went on we had what we called divisional support units, which is it was still while the SPG was a thing.
Right.
But we had like a divisional version of the SPG. So we would be in a van, all right trained. Been to Hounslow, been to Greenwich, done all my right training, done all that sort of stuff. Because I was a fairly big guy as well, I fitted in the image of, calling up the reserves. The reserves come round the corner, 10 blokes get out of a van.
All 6'4".
Yeah. Been eating raw meat all day, let's out. And obviously we did used to deal with issues that we were sent in to deal with.
Yeah,
and,
of course.
I'm not a particularly violent guy, but I do know that I was in a season there where I was seeing more violence because we were the answer to violence in a low-level way. So we got, sent to East London on the, I think it was Forest Gate. Nick got surrounded, the Newham 7 demonstration, and our job was to fight our way through the crowd to get to the police station, because the police station was utterly surrounded and there's not many guys in there. So we were sent from central London in a convoy of 3 van loads. They're all pumping themselves up on the way there, and and we rush out and we fought our way to get to the police station, to then put a cordon to protect the building, protect the people inside, and all the rest of it. So it was just, as a young guy, it was a lot of it you're doing out of obedience. You're doing it because this is what you're serving. You're not quite sure of all the implications of everything that you're involved in. We did the miners' strike. We did the biggest emotional one for me was the Wapping News International strikes. That was so emotional, and people don't realise it. And I'm not defending policing, but what I can do is say, from our side of things, it was very, very difficult. We were thrown in what we perceived to be somebody else's problem.
Yeah.
Whether it's Rupert Murdoch you liked or didn't like, or, but there were people that we would probably have a decent conversation with. Guys that coming past us, but taking out all their anxiety, all their vent, plus rent a mob as well, because there's always the different parties and different activists that latch onto any
rebel
demonstration.
for any cause.
Well, this is it, and you can as a young, fairly still naive-ish, but not naive anymore. I've had my eyes opened. You can see them. You could see that you're saying to these people, "What are you doing here? You aren't helping." That guy over there is struggling. He's losing his job, and yet you're coming on. You're making this something that it isn't.
Yeah.
But we didn't have a voice. We just had to stand there. We just had to reset.
But without fear or favour, and that's what we did.
Exactly. But it's literally, we were called all sorts of things. Rent a mob, and you've got a soul, and do you know who's in bed with your missus at home, and that's okay. But hour after hour, cold after cold, days after days, every now and then, and I'm not ever going to justify police officers breaking out and using inappropriate behaviour or assaulting people. I would never do that. But in the back of me, I sort of almost understand. I won't justify it, but I can understand why in certain circumstances you snap, day after day after. And then, the barriers that you're standing behind, which in effect are keeping you back, because that's what's happened after a few days. It's not about corralling the demonstrators and keeping the demonstrators from the premises so that they're not attacking the building. It ends up being, well, this is holding us back. You are passing me very cocky and very close to me and in my face and being really, because I can't get to you.
Yeah.
So every now and then there was a strategy or something happened, and then the barriers got removed, and then there was violence.
Yeah.
And as I say, I'm not a particularly violent guy. I did get myself involved in a few different things. But mentally, that was very, very hard. I ended up walking off one night, and much to my... I really don't... Again, I don't understand it. I just walked off. I went for half an hour, 45-minute walk on my own in full uniform, wandering the streets of East London. Didn't know where I was. Round the back of London Hospital, up and down the Mile End Road, a young police officer, no radio, on me Todd, probably vulnerable, but I'd had enough.
The trouble is that, and you're quite right, because when you're standing in that situation, nobody knows what your private hell is, what's going on in your life and your mind. So when I've had it where they're shouting out, "Oh, I hope you get cancer, I hope your kids die, who's sleeping with your missus whilst you're here," all those things. It's forgotten that actually we are human.
Yeah.
That we have got a human side,
Yeah.
and the compassionate side of the police service, which is enormous. It's absolutely enormous. It's not all about control or conflict or arresting people. It's the compassion, the social side that gets lost. And I get really frustrated that the police service in general, they rarely broadcast with any success the great stuff that they do. When you get the negativity that the police service are facing at the moment, there's nobody coming out and saying, "Well, actually, this is what we've done. We've helped this. We've done that. We're working in this community." No, they've turned over and said, "Yeah, we're really sorry." And there isn't anybody that I know. None of my friends think what those two individuals who will remain unnamed from the Metropolitan Police. Nobody will think that what they did was a good thing.
Yeah.
But there's nobody defending the police and saying this is the stuff that we are doing.
Yeah. Well, nobody's actually shouting very loudly about the thousands of police officers that when we as a group and as a connected group, and it's weird, having retired 10 years ago, I still feel that there is some connection or an understanding.
Yeah, there is.
Of when you hear, a police officer has been doing stuff for so many years, like we're currently talking about, and gets found out and convicted, the public, it's portrayed that therefore the public are right to be suspicious of all police officers. What I'd prefer there to be a narrative of is a more realistic narrative, that there is a representation of the thousands and thousands of police officers that are all shouting happy days, are cheering when these guys get caught.
Locked up, yeah.
When it's found out the bad apple,
yeah.
we are the ones cheering louder than anybody.
Yeah, absolutely.
But we don't see that. And I don't know, I'm not sitting here as isn't it so bad for me and all that. I'm not saying that.
No.
But I am saying there needs to be this sort of, I'd much prefer to see a balance. One of the phrases that I use now to this day is I am about telling a good news story.
Yes.
Cheering people on that are doing things that are good.
Yeah.
Because for far too long, and it still's going on now, even today, we catch a bad news story and it gets a lot of publicity, and there's a lot of uptake. We're thinking last week of a guy that didn't wear his seatbelt on a film shoot. Most people look at that and go, idiot, or I will go, who was the guy filming him? Or who were the guys around him at that moment? Because he's got millions and one things going on in his mind. Who was the guy that pressed the record and didn't think, hang on a minute, I'm setting him up here.
Yeah.
He ain't got his belt on.
Yeah.
Boss, if we're going to do this, you need to put your belt on.
Yeah.
Oh, crikey me, yeah.
Yeah.
Or was there a conversation? He did have his belt on, and then they're just chatting, it looked better if you turn that way and this way, and, it looks clunky, I'm feeling restricted, I'll take my belt off. We don't know.
No.
But suddenly, all the good news that guy has possibly done on our behalf, and it must be horrendous, juggling everything that he's got to juggle, it's like about him not wearing a seatbelt.
It dissipates.
Exactly. Yeah. So if you turn that into general, where we're at, about good news stories and bad apples and all the rest of it, and, miners' strikes, News International strikes, Broadwater Farm riots, things like that, which, for that season of my life as a young, single, ex-county guy, gone into London in a bit of a naive way, you start to understand the bigger picture. 1 minute I'm standing at Trafalgar Square monitoring the traffic with my mate. Boom! What was that? That was unusual. Out of all the noise in London, we had boom! And we looked at each other, and my mate, the blood ran from his face because we knew something had just happened. And it was the Harrods bomb.
Oh, wow.
The next minutes was just like, it was something out of a bizarre, that everything was quiet. Everybody that was around, we were miles from Knightsbridge.
It must be 2 miles from Knightsbridge.
Yeah, but it was one of those sounds that goes in your core.
Yeah.
And it shakes you and you go, what? And I looked at him and he looked at me and we looked around and you could see people were all like, look at what, I don't know what that was. Then the chaos, at Whitehall was just, it came to a grind, Parliament Square. Then you start to hear all the emergency vehicles. And very vividly in my mind is a good mate of mine, Tony Egan, who was driving our station van that day, had obviously was up near Hyde Park Corner or something like that. He got to the scene fairly quickly. Well, he called up on the radio saying he's trying to get to St Thomas's Hospital, and we had to physically run up and down Whitehall and Parliament Square to move vehicles out because we knew he was coming, and we knew he was coming fast. So we're moving things out. We're getting up a pathway for him. Well, I to this day, I watched his face as he drove his van through Parliament Square. He was as white as a sheet. It was like I'd seen a ghost. Because what I didn't know is in the back of the van at that stage, he had some very severely injured people.
Wow.
Do you know, and when you reminisce, when you talk like this, when you try and say to people that we were guys just trying to do our job,
yeah.
Do you know, and you get thrown into these, political things, or, you're there representing some stuff that you've got no probable comprehension of what it is. I've just been standing there one day and now I'm at Wapping and tomorrow I'm at Chelsea football trying to keep everybody from fighting. I mean, what's that all about?
And you're talking to the same people that are probably on the picket line.
We also did Speaker's Corner.
Oh,
which
did you?
I don't know if it still goes on.
Yeah.
It is where there's a free-for-all. Anybody can come along and say
say what they like.
Say what they like. And it was very antagonistic and very... actually, in other circumstances, we would be arresting them for breach of the peace,
absolutely,
or some public order offence or something like that. And you go there, and you literally, I saw you at Wapping the other day, or you were at the, the march down Edgware Road. Do you just go to demonstrations?
Yeah.
And yes. Or they'll be outside South Africa House.
Yeah.
So one day they're freeing Nelson Mandela, then they're against Rupert Murdoch, and then they're at Speaker's Corner spouting stuff that is just provocative. And you think, this is the environment that
It's toxic, isn't it?
But then I'm as a 21-year-old ex-county guy with this uniform on, thrown into this. Right, you've now got to go and keep the Queen's peace. You've got to keep order. You've got to prevent people, stepping over the line. And then if they do, you've got to then react. You've got powers. When you lay hands on people, that's official. And I still remember there was a bit of, not fear of the police, there was a bit of respect.
Respect.
So I could walk round Speaker's Corner and I could catch someone in the eye and call them out and they would come. Nowadays, probably you just, I don't know.
But can you imagine that they were so well mobilised, the way that they did their protest and, like you say, South Africa House, Wapping. Can you imagine how easy it is now for political groups to mobilise with Facebook and Twitter and everything else? It's all on a plate for them.
Yeah. So
it's so easy.
So I mean, literally, I'm sure there's some people that just their life is consumed with
I know there are,
one demonstration, one cause, and all the rest of it. Now, this is interesting for me to say. So one thing I haven't said all through this time, I am somebody that has been brought up within the church family, within faith, with an understanding that there is a higher thing and all the rest of it going on. So where is all of that in my mind as well? So I'm this young, naive police officer trying to learn this. I've had this upbringing. I've made a commitment, to follow Jesus when I was a young man, but that's sort of started to get a little bit put on the back burner. But I am still somebody of a conscience. I'm still very much in the community spirit.
Yep.
I used to laugh to think that, I did used to stand at places like Wapping and say, I am here because I want to help the community. Mm-hmm. And yet the community that I'm trying to help is walking past me and
calling you all names under the sun.
Absolutely. And as I said earlier, okay, we can all put up with it, turn the other cheek and all the rest of it, but hour after hour, day after day, I haven't yet met anybody in life that wouldn't just lower their guard every now and then and say, well, why don't you go and, do one as well, in the quietness. Well, you can't now because it'll probably be recorded on
YouTube
somebody's mobile
yeah.
device, and young police officer says this. So, I mean, it's different days. But faith was also in my consciousness as well. So going to Broadwater Farm, going to Wapping, going to the miners' strike, doing Speaker's Corner, there's something in me also that what is this all about and all the rest of it. I didn't have many answers at that point. I wouldn't say I was a fully church-going Christian spouting, whatever you want to call it. I wasn't somebody that was, if you'd asked my shift mates, is there anybody here of faith? They might have gone, well, we're not sure. I wasn't so out and about that I was...
I was going to ask that. Were you overtly, with your faith, as you're on, you're very overt around it now, but I suppose at 21 there's a lot of peer pressure, isn't there, around...
Massive. I wanted to fit in like anybody else wanted to fit in. Literally, there was a pecking order on your shift as well. You looked up to the area car driver and the van driver. They were like, wow, wouldn't mind being a van driver one day. Then I was a van driver, and there was like, people were looking up at me and thinking, what are you looking up at me for?
It's because you're 6'4", Phil.
Yeah. But I'm just a geezer that's done a driving course, and I had to be now driving the van around rather than walking around like you are. Do you know? So it's all that going on. And trying to find out who you are as a person, trying to find out who you are as a man, what is your ambitions and all the rest of it. So there's all these different factors going on, but also I had this thing going, and faith at that point, I've got to say, probably went back in the back of my mind rather than to the front of my mind. but when that got reignited again, when I was in my early 20s, I had a point. I went to I'd met a beautiful young lady that's now been my wife for 35 years. Yeah, 35 years.
Fantastic.
Got to get that right. But there was something in me that reignited. Oh, hang on a minute. You know, not only am I doing all this, not only am I in this position of policing and I've been doing it a few years now, I've also put this other thing in me, this other belief, to the back burner. But then it was reignited. This guy spoke at the Albert Hall. It was classic. You know, how many times have you heard it when people say, in amongst the thousands, I felt that they were speaking directly at me. It was one of those moments. And so I recommitted myself to my faith when I was 23, I think.
And what year was that? So that's
about
87.
Yeah, that would have been about 86, 87. I transferred from the Met to Essex in 88. Yeah, so but that'd probably been about 87, 88.
Right.
That
Can I just take you back a step? Because you talked about Broadwater Farm, and that if there was ever an occasion that was going to test your faith, that was it, because that's where Keith Blake lost his life.
Yeah.
What was that like as a young constable going to Broadwater Farm in the knowledge of he'd either passed away at that point or you were in the middle of a battle? What was that like?
I think from memory, on my way there, was probably the most frightening time in my police career. I've been to some things. I've been thrown in some violent aspects, you know, West Ham football, fighting in the middle of all the crowd, taking a few, you know, whacks to the stomach and round the head and all the rest of it. So, but I can remember, I can't quite. I know that we were monitoring the radio, and that we heard what some of the police officers on the ground were saying, screaming. Absolutely. Bearing in mind that we were a disciplined police force, radio procedure, we know, you know, if you're not going to use the radio correctly, then your message probably isn't going to be getting out there as you need it to. But they were in such traumatic thing. Literally, you could. I probably, if I'm honest, it was probably one guy starting up his radio transmission, but then he'd just get drowned out by the screams of his mate next door and all the rest of it. And to hear that going on, it was, I mean, nobody in the van was mucking about. It was very
unnerving.
Solemn. I was looking at some very, you know, senior, more ready, robust officers than I was, and I was looking at them thinking, they're not mucking about.
No.
This is serious, and we were on our way. And you know, we spent a couple of days at Broadwater Farm, and I got to say that was something else. That was just something else. Just the, and again in a with a different hat on it, with different knowledge on it. Just for me, if and I don't know what people listening to this, you know, podcast, you know, I don't know where they're about in life. I don't know what they're thinking. So I'm talking to people that I'm probably never going to even meet.
Yeah.
But if you are somebody that sort of is aware of other things that influence us, you know, in our subconscious, in our different states of thinking, then in my subconsciousness, when I arrived there was, the only way I can describe it, it was tangible evil that we were amongst. I'm not saying that everybody there that was demonstrating that probably had an axe to grind and so on. I don't know if there were people there that had come in. Well, I know there was people that come in there from other areas of Tottenham and probably elsewhere that have, you know, this is kicking off. You
there
know,
for the fight.
The old Bill getting a kick in, let's go and join in. So there was that. But in amongst all of that, there was tangible sense of something evil, something really dark going on, and that was horrible. So it was scary, it was frightening. We had a few, compared to the big violence, few what we would probably call scuffles, and a few really nasty incidents over the next couple of days. But yeah, that was not a great time.
I think people listen to this and to explain it, it hurts when one of your colleagues gets killed. It hurts, but you get on with the job in hand. And even now, I will watch something. It doesn't matter where they are in the world. The 2 coppers that got killed out in Australia, in Queensland, that hurts.
Yeah,
because they're us.
It's weird, isn't it?
Oh, mate, I honestly, I get so upset.
Yeah.
But that's what we are. We're coppers.
Yeah.
You carve us in half, and we've got police all the way through us.
But I don't really. If I as I've explained earlier, I'm not a particularly academic. I'm not stupid. But I don't understand how that happens. Even a guy of faith, even though I know that we're connected, it's that same old thing, isn't it? You see somebody that you haven't seen for like 15, 20 years, and yet you see them. This
synergy.
It's incredible.
Oh, it is.
You see it. It's almost like you've been in each other's pockets for the last 20 years.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
You start off from where you left. It's almost like you just paused in a conversation.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you're looking at, there's people in your life that you've got that connection with.
Yeah.
Even me and you today.
Absolutely.
We've never been like buddies.
No.
We're not massive ex-drinking part. But there's a synergy between me and you. It was really nice to see you. I met another colleague in a supermarket on Saturday morning. And I bumped him, and we hugged in the middle of Morrison's.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, but I'm not even sure if we got on that well when we worked together.
But that's how we are.
It's weird. It's a weird thing. You do feel it. Yeah, and you do feel it.
But we're family. It's a family thing.
That almost, and I hear those expressions, and some people. I mean, and I don't find myself being a particularly fluffy, flowery type of person. But when we say with family, for some that they were sitting there and going, oh my goodness, you make me feel sick. I'm not saying that, but there is a connection that we do feel it.
Yeah.
There's something going on. So even if something goes on, like you've just expressed, around the world, what is it that makes us feel that is in any way something for us to feel about? We don't know the circumstances, we don't know them.
No.
We don't know their lives, we don't know their backstory, and yet we do feel something in ourselves. Oh, I can imagine what your colleagues on your shift are now going through.
Yeah, because we've been through it, haven't
exactly.
we? We've lived that, we've walked that path.
And we've lost people.
Yeah.
We've lost people on our shifts, we've lost people in our, different things. I mean, there was a time, even now, I'm aware that there's some ex-colleagues of ours that are ill and that are terminally ill.
Yeah.
And you read a message, you see it flash up, I don't know, on a Facebook or something like that. You sit there and think, oh, that's just
another part of your life.
That's a shame.
Yeah, it is massively. Yeah.
And then other people comment, and then you go, oh, in a funny way, it's you're commenting, you're still here.
Yeah.
You start ticking people off. It's like a roll call, But is everybody okay?
It's one of those jobs, and I've said this before, even if you're on a shift and you didn't particularly like somebody, but they're in a fight, you'd get out. You wouldn't turn your back on them. You'd be out there with them.
Exactly.
And that's how the police service is, and that's why I get really upset with the detractors. So 1988, you're now transferring to Essex.
Yep, come to Essex because there was a bit of me still wanted to experience community policing. And I wasn't getting that opportunity in London. I'd taken various courses. I'd become quite a senior PC, doing, instructing other younger police officers that were coming along, doing the van driving, doing communications. You get certain skills within the rank, which then makes you like, you can't go anywhere. If you go, we've got to retrain somebody or we've got to get somebody in with your skills. And I was getting frustrated at that. So I thought, right, okay, I'll knock on the door of Essex. I'm an Essex boy. And very quickly I was accepted and got posted to Brentwood. And then got a little bit disillusioned then, because the paperwork was a lot different from what I was used to, and wasn't enjoying that so much. Just wanted to be flying around, helping people, dealing with things, etc., etc. Where there was a bit, it was a bit more, all right, I've been out there, I've dealt with this, I've got a prisoner in. Oh my goodness, I've now got to go and take a statement. I've now got to get a video. I've got to go and get the doctor's report. And I've got to put a file in. And oh my goodness. So that was getting me down a little bit. So I went to my local Chief Inspector, Dennis Shepherd, and said to him, this is what I was thinking. And he looked at me and said, basically, just summing it up, words to the effect of, I don't think you've given Essex enough of a chance yet. You know, you haven't really given us a chance. So before you go, I won't stand in your way if that's what you want, but why don't you go on CID? And I sort of said to him, I've got no ambitions to go on CID whatsoever. I've never thought about that. I did an attachment when I was in London, didn't really like it. He said, well, go and give it a chance. And I went on there for a 4-week attachment. There was a guy there that had come from Basildon called Bob Davis. He was my detective sergeant, and again there was some stories going around about him and the reason that he'd been moved and all the rest of it. But then again, it wasn't my position to ask. But for me at that moment in my career, to be put aside such a senior detective. Who
he was one of life's characters,
absolute character, knew the ins and outs of the job, knew how to get the job done. I started to watch, listen, learn, and also, beside the fact I was looking at him as a bit of a tutor, I also got myself involved in a investigation into some commercial burglaries, and was enjoying that. I got the opportunity of staying on after the 4 weeks to carry on the investigations into the burglaries. So I did that, managed to get some arrests in, managed to put quite a complicated file together with a lot of assistance from the other detectives in the room. Keith Davis was there as well, and Pete Nellis, Pete Holding. Wow, I'm remembering names that I haven't thought about for ages. So it was there was some real characters in that office. Ian Shedd, there were Eve Curtis, that were all trying to help me be this detective, and I didn't really know that I wanted to be a detective. I got to the end of my 10-week stint, and then I was given the opportunity of staying on to finish off the file and everything, so I did that. Got myself to the point of I was now presenting it all at court, thinking, oh my goodness, I've never had this experience before. Then another opportunity for another 10 weeks came up, and then there was a murder at Highwoods Hospital. Barry Bradford was killed by Lawrence Anderson Mullins, and I got myself involved in that investigation.
Was that the guy that was hammered in the field, in the outside,
in the hospital?
In the hospital
he was just bullied to death. He was killed by the Lawrence's bare hands, and it was not nice. No. It was a real thing. But I got involved in that, and as part of the me and Bob and a couple of others put the papers together. So by the time that was there, I'd done my junior CID course, and then got posted to Grays and went on to the department at Grays, and was doing that, and was seeing all sorts of things at Grays that I'd never seen before. Trying to keep up, didn't really fit because I wasn't a Grays. I didn't come up through the Grays ranks, and they were quite a tight bunch at that point. But I'd made some really good connections there. Sue Harrison was my DS, so that was good. And then Ray Berman came as the DI.
And he's gone. He's a vicar now.
He is now a vicar.
I know. You wouldn't have put the two together, would you?
This is part of my story. Is that there is other people that I now know outside of the job, having retired, that have come to me and said, "Oh, Phil, didn't know this, because later on, we haven't got there yet, but later on, I did become a little bit more affirmed in who I was and in my faith. And I had a bit of an experience in the office one day, in the crime squad office, where we were a surveillance team, and there was a conversation going on, and I thought, there's a lot of opinions being thrown around here, whereas actually I've got a slightly different opinion. And I thought, well, hang on a minute, my opinion is just as valid as anybody else's.
Absolutely.
Why am I shying away from just sharing it from a different perspective, from a faith perspective? Because I was a bit more confident in my faith by now. I've married, had my children, was doing stuff within a local church, so I'd become a bit more comfortable with having a faith in something other than what we lived every day. So I was sitting there, and then I retired, and then a few years later, a guy that worked in my office contacted me and said, Phil, you didn't know this. While you were in the office talking about things of faith and all the rest of it, he said, I was agreeing with you, but I never told you that I was also a person of faith. Because of that whole pressure, that whole mystery, and that whole...
What a shame.
I sort of understand it sometimes, because, there is still a bit of a culture that, are you going to be laughed at? Are you going to be mocked? Are you going to be looked down on for whatever? Not just religion, but anything that you sort of share that maybe, this is my hobby. I've never shared this hobby with you lot because you'll rip me to shreds.
Yeah.
That type of thing. So I've got this faith. I've got this belief in something that I know that you particularly are against, or you never say anything about. You seem warm to it. So if I get the chance, and if it's because, we're there to talk about crimes and criminals and investigations. We're not there but we do have downtime when we're having a cup of coffee, or we're having a bit more sociable chat, or drinks after work, or whatever. We can talk about ourselves and our lives and our hopes and our dreams. So at those points, but even then, like Ray Berman, I'm pretty sure, unless he came to faith later on after I'd worked with him, I don't know his story, but he's now a Church of England vicar in Cambridge or something.
Yeah, but you see, now I don't know, and I'd love to speak to Ray and find out, and I will get hold of him, because his persona was such that I would never put him and the church in the same room, if I'm really honest with you.
I think that's a fair assessment. That is a fair assessment.
And he's a great guy, and he was absolutely, him and
very motivated in everything he did. Everything he did.
Yeah.
When we were there at Grays, we had an operation called Rolling Thunder.
Yeah, I remember.
4 days of police warrants and all the rest of it. It was a bizarre concept. But the thing that a lot of people took their eye off, a lot of what that was about, is public confidence in the local police. A lot of it was, there's a lot of stuff that we need to get on with, and there's some nickings that we need to go and get on with. Right, let's write off resources, let's have 4 days. The crime reported during those 4 days was almost zero.
Yep.
We were out on the front foot, we had resources, we had uniform officers, we had detectives, we had resources coming in from around the county just to facilitate all the warrants that were going in, the arrests, the interviews, the packages, the evidence files. So there was a lot of results. But that, on the back of that, and Ray was always talking to us about the crime stats and our detection rates, and come on lads, we've got to keep this going. He had grafts and all sorts going on. So that was my period of time with him. Then I think he ended up being superintendent in the Met.
He went to Nottingham with Mick Todd.
Oh, yeah.
He went to Nottingham with lovely Mick Todd.
Mick Todd, there's another story.
Yeah, I know.
That's sadness, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, but Ray, I thought he came back to East London, didn't he?
Oh, yeah, he did.
Romford?
He went to the Met as the superintendent. Romford, yeah.
Yeah. So he's always a chit, and now he's like, running his church, and he's happy, and he's keeping bees and all the rest of it. And I'd be interested, when did his journey of faith start? When did he have it in it? I don't know. I'd never felt...
An epiphany, if you like, for want of a better word. But, because you were at Grays, But you then go on to the Drugs and Serious Crime Squad.
Yeah,
from there.
Yeah, so it was called the Central Detective Unit when I went on to it. So it's 3 teams: one a surveillance team, one a drug squad, and one the major investigation team. So I went on there with Brian White and Graham Hadley and Phil Bridge, Billy Clark.
Wow.
Yeah.
Some real strong characters there.
Well, they were all ex. I mean, I didn't really know
Regional
why I was
Crime
there.
Squad.
Yeah, me and Jason Wield had joined there from Divisional CID. We were like fish out of water.
You weren't allowed an opinion there, mate.
No.
Not until you got your...
Graham Hadley as well. He come from Division as well as our DS. But the other guys, all ex-Regional Crime Squad, you know, all being involved in covert policing for a number of years. You know, some of them were undercover officers as well. Al and Al, both undercover.
Yeah.
You know, so it's, you know, I was in a like, whoa, how have I got George Florence was my DI. I think he was the one that wanted to change what it looked like. You know, so they did want to be open to recruiting some guys from Division. But normally it was like you're coming back off a Regional Crime Squad where they're going to put you. I'll put you in MIS because that's where, you know, they fitted. So we were doing, you know, all sorts of undercover operations, surveillance operations, internal investigations. The biggest one we did was the Rettendon murder. You know, we were out on a plot in Southend somewhere on the day of it. We'd actually driven past the Rettendon murder plot when we'd come through. We then got told back to headquarters and then we were deployed on that. So we worked on that for about 2.5 years. You know, doing
actually on the murder inquiry itself.
Yeah,
or on the Apache.
Yeah. So that you had like the incident, the major incident team that were investigating it, and then we were doing all the internal covert tactics around just trying to help and trying to get to the bottom of who had done it and how they'd done it and all everything else. So we managed, you know, to open up several avenues. Some of them didn't go anywhere. Some of them were really off the wall covert tactics. Bob Scott was sort of advising on some of the. I
spoke to him the other day.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
He's again, him and Pauline, you know, really, really good characters and had an influence in my life at headquarters, which was really good. So yeah, we got involved in the Rettendon murders and amazing to see, you know, the tactics that were. I mean, I went to Zeebrugge, collecting sand samples on the beach. You know, it's just bizarre. You know,
incredible.
And then, went to Spain.
All on
just doing some. Went to Spain with Brian White for 2-3 days. You know, looking at some of the other players that were around that. So yeah, lots of interesting investigations, lots of really memorable moments.
I met Ivan Dibley. I had a coffee with Ivan Dibley on Friday as well.
Wow.
He's just done, and this will all come out, but we've just done some work with Revelation Films around that particular job.
Right.
And I think that Ivan's account will be definitive. It will stop all this nonsense about they didn't do this, they didn't do that. We know that Essex Police got the right people, locked up the right people. They are the killers. End of story.
I am convinced, even to this day, and I've seen all the films, I've heard all the story, I've heard all the rumours, I've been approached myself to get involved in. I can't remember what it was, but I didn't want to because I thought that they were a bit antagonistic. But I'm convinced. I'm absolutely convinced. When you look at it all.
Well,
and you look at what's
happened
since.
See this. You'll enjoy it because
Good.
Ivan. He's 78 now.
Wow.
He's as sharp as a box of razors. And when I approached him, said, "Look, we're doing this. We're doing this piece of work.
Yeah.
Are you interested?" He said, "Yeah, I'm interested." He said, "And I don't care what they print, as long as they print my story."
Yeah.
And the way that why we got to where we got to.
Yeah.
He said, because there are so many conspiracy theories about we didn't do this, we didn't do that, we did everything. It was cutting edge. The way that things were dealt with on that particular inquiry were cutting edge.
Exactly. exactly. And I know from my side, being he's up there, superintendent, I'm down here, constable, we were given access to a lot of stuff that we wouldn't normally do.
Yeah.
So it was a privileged position. I know I was in the inner core of the covert tactics. So looking at where, and I'm convinced.
Yeah.
I mean, there's obviously stuff that, we won't want to talk about because it's still, sensitive stuff, but that I'm convinced. So.
How was that though for you? Because you knew in the background there was Operation Apache, which was all to do with the.
That was painful, if I'm honest. We got delayed. Not only on that inquiry, but on another inquiry as well, where we, in doing what we were doing, uncovered, what's the word?
Improper practices.
Yeah, corruption, whatever you want to call it, whatever you want to term it as, and it hurts, when we're trying to do a genuine criminal investigation, and then we're like, we cannot ignore what is going on.
No, neither should you.
We have come across this behaviour that is not just people making mistakes or cutting corners. This is criminal, and they know it. They are in receipt of benefit because of their relationship. Well, how does that happen? Hang on a minute. That guy has told us that he was arrested by those two officers, but there's no custody records. There's no interview notes. There's no... sorry, where were you taken? What do you mean you were taken to that station? Well, that station, there's no custody suite. So how did the interview go? It was in an office of two people with no recording facility. That is wrong, out and out. What is going on? Right, so your alarm bells. So do you ignore it? No. We couldn't on both of the investigations I'm thinking of, and there's another one, that you think, well, we've unearthed a situation. We've got to deal with that before we can genuinely present our evidence to a court of law, that if they ask questions, what was this about, what was this about, well, we've dealt with that. We are the guys that have come in and said, no, we agree with you, that is wrong, and we've dealt with it. So in a way, you need to look at us to say, we are here to represent the full and frankest of investigations that we're involved in. So, we did do that. So they were interesting times, and it was, those sorts of things, and then coming to a point of confidence where, you can run your own operations and that sort of stuff. So we were there in doing that, and trying to uphold the law in the most difficult circumstances.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was at Braintree at the time, so it was an interesting dynamic for me, and I was working with Keith, and so I saw the other side. I didn't know what was going on in the background. No. Didn't have a clue, totally as green as grass. Yeah. But there you go, that's how it's...
We probably didn't know that, one of the main guys to do with the Retina murders was, living on
our patch, and he was an informant for our office.
Exactly.
Who knew, But you see that... Because of that, the way that informants were dealt with changed completely across the nation.
Absolutely.
Because it was accepted that you and I, as detectives, would walk into a pub, we'd have a beer with somebody.
Yep.
We'd even put our subs in to get that money back for a beer.
Yep.
But we would have got a load of information.
That's right.
Because of what happened on that particular job, it changed the dynamics, and therefore we were no longer allowed to get our own informants.
No, it was all controlled. It's all controlled. It was all, you had to go for special training to become a source handler, and it all got a lot more. And to be honest, it probably was the time to get things more organised in that way. Because actually you do get a lot more out of the information if you are a bit more organised in how you deal with the information, how you make it, that the sources are protected like we wanted to protect them. So it probably was a good time to do that. And then I became, after I sort of came off of MIS, I went back to division for a little while. Then I went to FIB as an intelligence officer, but then a source handler. So then to becoming involved in that type of work was, it was good work because it was very cost effective. You know, you're going to meet these guys. You're investing in them. You're trying to keep them, and then you hope that the results that come out of them or the information they give really helps an investigation, whether it be a domestic burglary or it be a child abuse accusation. You know, you're cutting through months and months and months of police time of investigation because you're getting to the evidence. Absolutely, and I hope they're still doing that type of work now to this day, but I don't know.
I think they are. I think what it is, though, I think the frustration. Bear in mind, there's 1.9 million people live in Essex now. It's how many informants are cultivated, how many people have they actually got on the books, and I would imagine, certainly when I left, there weren't a huge amount. But criminals are criminals, and they will give information. There are very few criminals, even in the upper echelon, that won't talk about somebody else, even if it's just to remove the other person as being a threat to their criminal organisation.
You put anybody in the right circumstances, you know, when the chips are down and when you're having to take stock, you know, if you are encouraged in the right way, then I think it was people are daft and not to take
advantage of it.
Because it's an easy way out of for whatever you're going to get out of it, a reduction in sentence, financial gain, sorting out an old ex-colleague that you don't want to carry on doing what they're doing. So there's all sorts of grudges, but well managed and properly organised with trained officers. I think it is a tactic, and I think it is a legitimate tactic. So I hope that they're still doing it.
So there were some benefits out of that particular inquiry. So you're at FIB.
Yeah.
Where do you go to then? Because you have a catastrophic period in your life, don't you?
Yeah.
What happens next?
So from there, I went back to the covert surveillance team. So I'd learnt surveillance when I first joined the CDU, and I'd become a surveillance trainer, and I really enjoyed covert policing and being behind the scenes, having the privilege of getting involved in some pretty serious investigations whilst I've been doing it. So I went back to be part of the team, and I think I was probably acting sergeant at the time when an investigation, because we in those days we were responsible for running our own investigations and doing the surveillance and doing the evidence gathering and the court preparation.
Right.
And I was given an operation to run on a drug dealer coming out of the south of the county, and started to investigate that and realised that he was very, very organised. He was a businessman, but he was supplying multi-kilos of cocaine into our county.
Right.
So he needed a proper investigation. It wasn't just something that you could just go and stumble on. It wasn't just to go and stop him in a vehicle one day. You know, we had to work hard at who's this guy, what's he doing, what's his relationships, and what's the system. So he was very organised. So he had a transportation network, which was separate, and it was being run by one of the transportation network was being run by another local guy from the south of the county. But then there was also another group of runners and dealers and all the rest of it. So he was the guy with access to the commodity, and he would be the one that was getting the cocaine. So that was my investigation to look at him. So we had various tactics involved, from covert policing, monitoring, all sorts of things we were monitoring. We had some of the highest level authorities in the land that you can get, and we were keeping a check on who is this guy. You know, we've got this guy, he's not leading a particularly lavish lifestyle, which, you know, the best, I call them the best, the more organised and the more, the ones that make the most money out of it don't actually use it themselves. So he was of that ilk. But he was right, and his network was all over the country. We knew he had connections with Manchester, Liverpool, various other points of the south of the country, but also into North Wales. So we deployed various different devices and stuff. We were monitoring things, and in the middle of the night, one night, I was responsible for monitoring one of the devices. I started getting activation in the middle of the night. Decided to turn the team out. All the team they'd been given permission to have all the vehicles and all their equipment, all the resources at hand. So we turned out from home all over the county, wherever we lived, and we were making our way to try and get control of the subject in a covert manner. So we didn't have any resources around him. We didn't have eyes on, but we knew where he was currently and where he was heading. So we were playing catch up, and it started to take us out of the county around the M25, started to take us along the M1, heading north. So I am now, as the supervisor, I've got to make decisions. You know, I'm the supervisor of a county surveillance team and a county investigation team with all sorts of support at high level. I've got policy books coming out my ear rolls, because a lot of the stuff that we were doing, we could make pre-decisions about it, make sure that if this happened, boss, are you comfortable if we did this? Yes, I'm comfortable. You do that to that degree. But on this morning, with no physical hands-on, with no control of the subject, I felt that we were starting to follow a bit of a ghost. And so I called the team and said, right, we're going to call it off at the services on the M1. We're not to go any further of here. So I called them up, and bearing in mind this wasn't in these current days of mobile phones and it's a one call to everybody, it was text messages and all this sort of stuff. So I'd called the day off, but as I was in the services myself, I must have been, I think I was in there on my own. I don't think I'd met any other of the surveillance officers, and I was sitting, and my last memory was that I was sitting eating a croissant and having a cup of coffee when the intelligence started to reform, and we had a chance that we could actually catch him up and get eyes on again. So I quickly put the message out, no, nobody stop, keep going, take the M6 west towards Birmingham, and let's see where we go from there. So my last memory of this operation is picking up all my stuff in the motorway services and heading back towards the car, having communicated this to the team. The reason I've got no other memory of it is because I've got amnesia. So I've got complete amnesia from this time till approximately 3.5, 4 hours later. So I get back. So everything I now tell you is been put together by eyewitness accounts, by traffic officers, investigations, and everything else. So what they say to me is, I then got back in my car. I was on my own. I was driving my car. I had no passenger, and I was making ground. It was about 4 o'clock in the morning. It was dark. It was raining. It was a really horrible morning. Very dark. And they think what I've done is then I've come back out onto the motorway, I've headed up, and I've gone on the M6 west, where in front of me, unbeknown to me, a car has an accident into the central reservation. And whether this guy who's had this accident is wanted or is just worried himself and ran off, we don't know. As far as I know, he has never been found or caught. Right. There's rumours that he was a wanted man and ran off because he'd had a crash. The car then rolls back across the motorway in the dark, in the rain, and then stops where it's rolling across lane 1 and lane 2. So it's side on, and they think probably what's happened is I've been searching ahead, going pretty quickly, seen the fact that this car is in the first and the middle lane. So I've taken the outside lane to avoid the damage. Yeah. But unbeknown to me, as the car's rolled back, it's dropped its engine block in lane 3.
Oh, my life.
So I'm now coming along pretty quickly. RTA in front of me, a crash in front of me, engine block in the dark. I've hit it. Don't know how fast I was going. I've got amnesia. But there's eyewitness reports from people coming the other way to say that they saw the underside of my car. They saw me fishtailing in the air. They saw me land, spin quite a few times. And then a Calibra came through the crash, and then that hit me. And then another vehicle came through the crash and hit the Calibra and me. So there's two scenes. There's the initial scene of the car that's rolled in the carriageway, and then the scene of three more vehicles, which I am part of, and I am in the driver's seat. The next really reliable witnesses that we've got is the rest of the surveillance team coming through, because they're catching up.
Right.
They're still not formed up, but they've come through, and the eyewitness accounts from Clive Wells and Barry Cowan, they've come through the first scene, and I think they would say they looked around and, oh, thank goodness it's none of us. Come across the second scene and look in and obviously see one of our vehicles is in the debris, and, you know, had to suck it up and go, oh, one of us needs to go to the vehicle. I can't remember if it was Clive or Barry, but one of them came to my car expecting the worst, to find me, you know, deceased, sitting in the driver's seat. Came to the car, and to their astoundment, could not find me in the car.
Really?
Wasn't in the car, no blood. There was severe damage to the vehicle. Looked round, and I was sitting across the motorway on the Armco. Come over to me, and at that point said, Phil, you all right? And it's at that point I collapsed. So there's something in your subconscious, keeps you going, fight and flight and all the rest of it. I was obviously functioning, but I wasn't safe, so I was still functioning. As soon as I'm in a safe place, my body gave up. I was placed in an articulated vehicle. Ambulance was called, taken to Nuneaton Hospital, spent several hours in the hospital in the casualty bed. Some of the other stories coming across from some of my colleagues now, because they obviously all arrived on scene, realised it was me, all came to the hospital. We're all now gathered around my bed, causing an absolute nightmare for the staff. 13, 14 plain clothes coppers with all sorts of various humour and different situations going on, and they were obviously causing a bit of a menace. But I awoke to, I'm not very proud of this, but it was a male nurse, came over, took my vitals and said, oh, Mr. Norton, oh, that's really good. Your temperature's coming down, your heart rate's coming down. It looks like, you know, you're going to be starting. And I looked at him and said, don't treat me like a mug, mate. You don't come over to me and give me some results and make me feel better about myself. Who are you to tell me all this is happening?
Phil.
And then he looked at me and went, oh. And then looked at everybody around, and I'm going, what's going on? Because at that stage, I've got no idea. I'm waking up in a hospital bed. And I was a bit aggressive. And he said, oh, Mr. Norton, right, this is the 8th time I've taken your vitals. You've been here for 2.5 hours. All your vitals are coming down and you're doing a lot better. And I look around me, and then a few of the jokers was coming around, because one of the other things I was repetitively saying was, where's my boot? Where's my boot? Because I wore Dr. Martin boots. Well, I was sitting in a hospital bed with only one boot on, because the force that I'd had to use on myself to get out of the vehicle meant that I'd pulled my leg out of my boot that was stuck underneath my seat.
Oh, no.
So I kept going on about this. Another couple of the guys, Dave Gibb, Mark Harrison, they got fed up of this. They'd gone back to the scene, couldn't find it, went to where the vehicle's been recovered, found the boot, but they had a real problem in getting the boot to come undone from underneath the car seat. So they've now come in with there, Phil, shut up, there's your boot, you know, and all the rest of it. So it's all going on, and the reason I this is a significant part of my life, and I've been talking to you a bit about, you know, why do things happen when they do? Why do certain people end up, you know, having really bad injuries or dying in certain circumstances? And I to this day, I don't know why some people fall off of a 14-story building and bounce, and other people die. I don't know. But I've tried to work out why I didn't die that day. I am a man of faith. I've led my life on and off with it being at the forefront of my mind, or being at the back of my mind, or being something in me that I'm aware of, but I'm not quite consciously aware of what it is. So I've got this time where I've now had this absolute calamity happen in my life, in the dark, in the wet, and I've been taken out, and I'm now. When you look at the pictures of the car, there is no room for me to be sitting in it. I'm a big guy, but I used to sit with my seat quite back. Where the engine has come into the driver's compartment, the steering wheel is now resting on the headrest of my seat. It's all mangled up. The engine compartment is where my feet should be, and I am a big guy. I am not an Olympic gymnast. You can't put me in that predicament and then say, in 3 swift moves, get yourself out. How on earth?
How does it happen?
How does it happen? How does just thinking about it in just small logical terms of how does even my big body even get in that space that's now left? How do you get out? How do you get across a motorway safely? How do you sit there? How does that happen? How does you picture all the things? And Barry was really funny because one of the last parts of the anecdotes that we share, and we still to this day, we meet up, we go for a curry, whatever, he will say, and you remember, Phil, when we were all standing outside the hospital, he said, I think a few of them were having a fag, and the doors, suddenly open, psh, and the outside door, psh, but nothing comes in, nothing goes out, psh, psh, and they shut again. And Barry, who's very, very quick-witted, and he said, that's Phil's visitor. He's gone. His job is done.
Brilliant.
So for somebody that's faith is trying to work this out, I mean, that brings a bit of a lump to my throat.
Of course.
And as I say, I don't know, the people listening to this, whether there is other things that have gone on in their life that they're like, how did that happen? Why then? I'm not sitting here, and I've never sat here saying to people that I am so special that I needed to be saved by something that we can't tangibly see or so. I'm also somebody that's been through life and have lost people that are very, very dear to me. My beautiful sister-in-law died at the age of 52. I mean, she's just it's ripped us apart. I mean, if I'm honest, we're still, she's still living in me, because she is just such a beautiful person. And when you look at, some conversations people have in life, why do some good people die and bad people survive? All those sorts of things go through your mind at certain times. So I'm not somebody that's sitting here saying, I was such a good person and my life, which has now led into me doing a number of bits for charity and trying to live my life using all the skills that we've learned through our careers and trying to use everything we've done to bring some sort of goodness into community. I'm not sitting here saying, well, because I was this, that and the other, I needed to be so. I don't fully understand how I didn't die that day.
No.
I've put it together over hours and days and months and painful reflection because I still have amnesia. I don't even understand amnesia. How can we not have a memory of 4.5 hours of our life? It's just blank. There is just a gap. Do you know? I don't know. I mean, there's people out there that study these things
But they say that when you go through trauma, and my dad was involved in a serious road collision in 1979, it's the way of blocking that pain out.
Yeah.
The pain that you've gone through, because you would have ultimately gone through pain.
Yeah.
And it's whether it's a faith that's preventing it or whether it's nature's way, I don't know. But I'm told that happens.
Yeah. So to have what I can only imagine to be a most horrendous, traumatic experience removed from my consciousness is one thing.
Yeah.
To survive is another.
Oh, absolutely.
And the people that are now talking to me, they're experienced police officers. They are like...
They've seen it all.
They've seen it all. They're the ones that there were other people's accounts of the days, members of the public, some professional witnesses that come out and turned and did the investigation and like look at you as if to say, I don't know how, mate. I don't know how you...
But you're sitting here. Yeah.
I don't know how you are alive, let alone not completely disfigured or disabled for the rest. I don't understand this. There was even a investigation, post-investigation, because there was a industrial injuries inquiry, which I eventually abdicated from because I found it too painful. So I said, no, stop. I don't want anything to do with this. But even there, you know, the investigators of that were coming and saying, I've seen all the stuff, the photo, I don't understand this. So I'm sort of trying to pick it all together. I'm trying to place it together. So part of my Christian walk, my faith in Jesus and something a bit bigger, you know, my trying to work out the meaning of life.
Yeah.
You know, put it in those simple things. It's about going through life in those different circumstances and using our different experiences and the things that we see and we understand and we feel, trying to explain to people that and whilst trying to explain to people who I am and what I'm about, and not decry other people and put other people down. But I am not a silly person. I am an experienced police officer that have been through a number of different things, and we've discussed so many things today, which I didn't think we would, but we have. Do you know? And in all that light, you know, somebody that is pretty much feet on the ground, looks now a family man, now a granddad like you. Wow, how did all this... Picking my way through life, wondering why there isn't a manual that helps us all deal with different situations, that we could just open a book and find out the answer. So we're working things out as we go along. We pick up experiences. We become... I don't know, one day I might even think of myself as being a mature human being. I don't know. Maybe I am now. I'm joking. But, you know, what you look at it and you think, well, actually, in saying all of that, I'm also trying to say to people that there was this circumstance, this traumatic incident that happened in my life that I look at and I can only get myself, if having years of being an investigator and a detective and dealing with some very serious investigations and using all sorts of tactics to get to the final outcome. In using all of that, I cannot see and work out in my circumstance, in that day where I possibly could have died in that traumatic incident, there is no other explanation to me than something out of body experience has decided that is not
your
my time.
Yeah.
That is not my time. So it's not his time. I need to intervene. I mean, I joke with people, and when I tell this in faith circles, or I've got a more of a faith audience or a Christian audience, I will say I fundamentally believe that I had two very big angels looking after me that day, and they're not fluffy, you know, winged things that flitter and flatter around, or they're not fairies and things like that. I had two proper geezer angels looking after me that day.
Yeah.
That, no, we need to get him out. When you look at the photos of the vehicle, the window, the driver's window, looks like, an interpretation could be that it's been pulled down from the top, because at the bottom of the thin bit that goes around the top of the window, both bottoms are snapped. Well, you think of the power that would need to just pull that down and just snap it. You look at the fact that I, a big guy, have been lifted out with such force that my foot has been removed from my boot.
Yeah.
I've been looked after. I've been taken. Do you know, yes, I was black and blue and you know, it was horrendous, but I had no broken bones. I had no severe blood loss. I've got some people call it mental health issues, but I call it just amnesia, because actually, if I'm really honest, it took me a while to get over it. It took me a while to drive again. It took me a while to drive in the dark. I did it in stages.
Yeah.
I drove. I got comfortable driving again. Then I did a bit of driving in the dark until I was comfortable. Then I did a bit of driving in the rain during the day. Then I did a bit of driving in the dark in the rain. And then slowly, after a period of time, I felt confident in driving again, and I'm okay driving now. But you look at all of that and I think, well, what is all that about?
Yeah.
What was that day about? And in certain circumstances, other people will say, it was the powers of darkness trying to take you out. I don't want to get into all that. All I know is that day, a traumatic incident occurred, a calamity occurred, of which I was involved in, but it just was not my time.
And you're lucky to tell the tale.
And here I am, having,
So how did that sculpt to you? How did that mould you afterwards? I mean, you already had your faith.
Yeah.
As a child, you had your faith. But you've gone through the rest of your police service maintaining that faith. Were you more overt within the office at that point once you, or did you still?
I think I became more overt because I had a lot of people around me
asking
questions. Yeah. How are you still sitting in your? We've now witnessed it. It's in our faces.
Yeah.
How is people in my private life, people in my family, people that know me, people that literally what?
And then you can honestly say only God knows.
Well, yeah, and that's what you have to say. I for myself have worked some of it out because that's the nature of the beast. We are investigators.
Yeah.
It's to be honest, for me now, it's the biggest outstanding investigation I've got in my life.
Yeah.
Do you know?
Of course.
I've worked really hard at various methods of regaining memory.
Yeah.
It's gone. I don't know. I don't know. I mean, again, educated people will tell me whether there is a time when it might all come back. It might be the case of, no, it was so traumatic that you in yourself are keeping it locked up, or there are other powers, or whatever that is. But it gave me a bit of an opportunity to say, look, lads, I'm not convincing you of anything. I'm just telling you the story. Let the story tell itself. And so I've a couple of times had the opportunity of sharing the story in with an audience. And my point is I want you to try and work it out for yourselves. I'm not going to stand in front of you and shout and scream and say, this is definitely what happened, because when you do that, quite often people will go, no, yeah, what are you talking about? And we'll just go away and think, well, no, you've told me to believe you. I'm not going to believe you, because I'm pig-headed, or my pride says no. So I never do that, but I'm quite happy to show the photographs. I'm quite happy to take people through the account and, to spend time on each individual thing and see whether they've got any other. But it's been investigated. It's been re-investigated. I have gone through it all, and I've still spoken to people, and there is no. So it gave me the opportunity of sharing in the office. So from that time, it's fairly obvious as to everybody I was working with that I am a man of faith, because I talked about it.
Yeah.
Could it be, lads, that I have been looked after because I have this faith? Again, though, trying to convince people, trying to make them understand, not because I feel as if I'm any important than anybody else, because of the people that I'd lost in my life. That was very raw in me as well. So you sort of, it does change you, though. I mean, so you've got the physical stuff and the mental stuff and all this, but then you do start to think, crikey, I've got these 3 beautiful children, my gorgeous wife. That could have been the day that they, of their whole lives changed. It's not just about you. And then the extended family, my friends, and it's in the blink of an eye, life changes.
Well, I was in my class, April the 10th, 1979, and my teacher, Mr. Pierce, came in. Head of year, came in, said, Paul, your mum's on the phone. I went into his office. My mum's on the phone crying. My dad is in intensive care in Colchester. He had 96 fractures on his right leg between his knee and the top of his thigh, and they thought they were going to amputate his leg. He's been disabled longer than he's been an able-bodied person, and I can tell you from a family point of view, it's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard. It's hard for us, but it's even harder for him because he's having to cope with all the stuff that went with that.
Yeah.
So no, I can understand exactly what you're saying because it is life changing
and it's real. And
it is real.
You know, again, you know, the people listening, they're going to know of circumstances that they've gone through, and different things have happened in their life, and maybe it's not caused them to question the meaning of life, and they have those conversations. So this did for me because of where I was at that time, and you know, and me trying to put all different bits of it together, put the jigsaw back together again, of which is an incomplete jigsaw. So I you know, I don't shout and scream, you know, from the top of the hill about the circumstance, but I do say, you know, we're just maybe, you know, just for once, if you've just heard that story and just want to say, well, what if, you know, okay. If I do put a what if in that I've never done before, what does that mean? And that I know people in my life that will still sit and go, oh, it's a nice story, Phil, but you're talking absolute rubbish. You know, what are you? What? Yeah, where are you? And I'll just say, look, I am not going to stand here and lose the will to live by trying to convince you. It's for you now to take that and just like you've just said, you know, about your father and that, you know, why did that happen, you know, and all the rest of it. And he's been going through life with this thing, but, you know.
But he's still here to tell.
Exactly. Do you know? Exactly. And you've had the privilege of getting to know him and share your lives, and he's been watching you and getting proud of some of your achievement and your brother and now seeing his great-grand. Do you know, it's that whole thing of, well, hang on a minute, you know, where are we going here? And I mean, I joke with my Christian friends, you know, I say, you know, I can't wait to get to heaven.
Right. I hope you've got some years ahead of you.
I do, because I still think that there's some things that I'd like to achieve, but I've also now got two beautiful grandchildren. I've got 3 children. I've got, you know, daughter-in-law, son-in-law, a lovely wife, lovely family, you know, lovely friends, and I don't want to not see them for many, many years, you know. So I'm not wishing to go and ask these, but I have a list of questions, you know, when you get there. When I meet him at the pearly gates, hang on a minute, before, okay, I hear you'll let me in, but can I just ask a couple of questions before I come in? You know, because
this interview's been tape recorded.
yeah. I might take a tape recorder with me, or maybe some more modern way of recording, because I'm not sure we have tape recorders anymore. But I'll stick a MP3 recorder in my pocket and say, look, I've got some questions.
God, why am I? Why did this happen?
Just before I come in, because once I'm in, I'm just going to be blown away by what's going around. I might forget the questions. Can I just ask before I?
So let's get to Phil. That you've got to the point you've retired.
Yeah.
You're 48, I assume, because you've joined as a cadet. So 48 and 3 quarters. 48
and a half. I went.
Young man.
Yeah,
but
very.
You haven't wasted your time, have you, mate? In the 10 years, you've done an awful lot of wonderful, wonderful things. Let's talk about the Phil on the outside now, because you had a very distinguished police career. But let's talk about Phil and the great things that you've done since, because I'm proud of you. And I'll come on to the bit
that does mean a lot, actually.
I'll come on to the bit that I'm really proud of the stuff that you do in your community. But to see you on telly after the Grenfell fire, you made me sit up.
Yeah,
I was sitting there, and there's my mate.
Yeah,
but let's talk about Phil.
Yeah, well, let's talk about Grenfell, if that's something. So I became. I went to a talk, as we all do, you know, by a local church guy on a thing called street passes, and I could see that there was real benefit in mobilising people within the churches of all the different flavours of Christianity that there are, of which there are many, to try and encourage people to use all their skills and their gifts, like I was being, you know, encouraged.
Yep.
Post police career, you know, you have got, you know, a number of skills and gifts within you, even if you've not identified them. And it doesn't matter what rank you were, it doesn't matter actually what specific role within the police force you did. We do all pick up skills along the way. So I went to this this talk, and they were talking about this thing called street pastors, which is about going out into the nighttime economy as Christians to care for people, to care and listen, to help is the motto, of people in different circumstances where they may have made bad decisions or circumstances have changed around them which have ended up making them vulnerable. So I think we can all think of times when maybe we've made decisions for ourselves, whether we've gone out with the wrong people, we've gone to the wrong place, we've had too much to drink, we've taken a substance, we've got involved in aggravation, we've gone in with a bad attitude, and suddenly circumstances have changed around us. We're in an environment that we're not sure about. We've got no preconceived way of getting home, or suddenly we're like, oh my goodness, we're so. For some of that is for younger people. It's not all about the young people though, because there are many people that through their midlife and then you start to look at older people becoming vulnerable as well. I mean, we have several times, come across vulnerable older adults that are going through some difficult traumatic times or going through some medical conditions where they need a bit of help, maybe to help them home or something like that. Or, we've come across people that are wandering the streets for hours and hours, and unbeknown to us, family members are out. We've been chatting to one lady in our safe hub one day, and look, the police helicopter's up tonight. I wonder what they're doing. Look, the searchlight is on. So, hang on a minute. I wonder if this is a missing persons inquiry, and we're sitting having a chatting a cup of tea with the person they're looking for. So we have to touch base and say, "Hey, are you looking for?" Because we've come across something, and it's never quite happened that way. But you do sit there wondering sometimes. So I've used all those skills to start locally a group called Street Pastors. Street Pastors have been in Essex County for over 15 years, Southend, Chelmsford, Colchester, where local Christians from local churches have decided to go on a course. We teach a number of different things because we take from all the different Christian denominations. We take people from all walks of life into, as long as they are who they say they are, as long as they're willing to come and serve their community in this way. They do it in uniform. They go out in 3s and 4s just for their own safety and security, just to make sure that they're okay and they don't become a problem that the emergency services have got to come and utilise their skills for.
Yeah.
We're not the police. We don't go to deal with incidents. We're not there to judge anybody. So we just do things like, walk along a street, build relationships with people. And if people want to have a conversation about something that they're going through in life, then we'll do that. If we come across some antisocial behaviour, we will try and encourage the people to resist or refrain from what they're doing.
Yeah.
If violence has broken out, we just monitor. We don't get involved. We don't go and start pulling people apart. We'll monitor. We'll deal with any onlookers or any bystanders, and we'll try and prevent the situation becoming worse by more people getting involved. And then we can do things like deal with the aftermath, maybe some first aid, if people need first aid. Right. Or we carry our 3 main things. As we carry bottles of water, which are for a bit of rehydration, but also it's a great distraction technique. We carry lollipops, and people think, oh, that's nice, little bit of sugar and all the rest of it. For me, it's about men that have lost, the red mist has come, and they are speaking or shouting rubbish just to put a lolly in their mouth, just to
pacify them,
just to shut them up for a couple of minutes. And we also carry flip-flops for any young ladies that are out and about that can't anymore walk down the street in their high heels. And many times we've seen that the odd injury has been prevented by just putting a pair of flip-flops on. You're not treading in glass. You're not stubbing your toe on a curb. You're not treading in dog poo or anything like that. So some really simple, what I call not rocket science techniques for engaging with the local community by keeping the good spirit going in nighttime economies, because some nighttime economies is a great place to go for a night out, but it's the bad decisions that people make or the circumstances change where they become vulnerable or
Yeah.
do you know, I had a really beautiful conversation with a lady one night. I mean, it was really inappropriate. A friend of mine who was out and about, she was absolutely smashed, absolutely out of it, and we had the normal hi Phil and the cuddle and all that sort of stuff were going on, and then she turned around, oh, this is my friend so and so, and oh Phil, you don't know her, she's just had some bad news. Yeah, she's got cancer and she's going to have both her breasts removed.
Oh dear.
And I looked at the woman telling me the story and my heart sank.
Yeah.
I looked at the woman that the story was about, and my heart could have broken right there and right there, because she had nowhere to go. She was just being, oh no, humiliated, whatever the expression, there and then in front of this guy that she'd never met before. And so I dealt with the lady that had told me, and then I looked at this other lady. I said, oh, I'm so sorry that you had to be introduced to me that way. And she looked at me and she said, it's okay, don't worry. I said, how are you? And she said, well, not great. She said, but I've got to hold it together. I said, well, why's that? She said, well, we're actually out for my birthday. And she pointed like 20, 30 yards away. That's my family, that's my children, that's my husband, and all the rest of it. And I went, okay. And, we're out for the night, so I'm holding it together. She said, I'm not great. She says, I'm really, really sad that I've got this and I'm going to have some serious. And I don't normally do this, but I see, normally we wouldn't put people on the spot. Normally I'd say to somebody, can I add you to my prayer list for tonight? Because I believe in the power of prayer. I believe that we can change atmospheres by making petitions to the higher authority that, depending on whether you believe it or not. I'm really not, again, I'll just share things as I see them. And but I looked at her and I said, do you mind if I pray for you? And she said, I absolutely loved that. And she was on the verge of breaking. And I said, don't break. I said, I understand that you've got to hold it together and now is not the time. I said, but can I pray for you right now? And we chuckled because we looked around. We're in the middle of the high street. It's dark, but there's hundreds of people around. Yeah. There's cars up and down and all the rest of it. So she said, I would really love that. And I had the absolute privilege of praying for her right then, just for some peace, just for some security, just to know that her children were okay. And I can't remember what I said, but it was a real privilege just at that moment, at that time, just to share with her. Not sure if I gave her a cuddle, because normally that's inappropriate, but I think I might have allowed myself to do that. And she just went away and just said, thank you. Phil. Do you know, and it's those little anecdotes that you add them all together and you just think, and I said to you earlier that life for me is about celebrating good news, celebrating, giving the voice to the things that are going on that are unseen, the thousands and thousands of things that go on in our communities. Yeah. I mean, one of my stories about COVID is to see the way that communities came together.
Oh, huge.
To see the way that people were supporting each other. Streets having WhatsApp groups, streets coming out to support the NHS, streets coming out to talk to people in a safe environment, coming out with their deck chairs and talking to the neighbours. Find out, you suddenly saw this community spirit at its best, at its very best. And that to me is about telling the good news story. I mean, the good news story for those of us that believe in faith is a good news story about Jesus and Jesus coming to the world to give us all a chance to get saved and to turn away from our ways. That's his good news message. But the good news message of our towns and our communities and the good spirit that we've got, it's just incredible. I think we've all got stories from COVID. COVID was a very sad, horrible time, and took us all through things that we never thought we'd experience in life. And people have said, well, it must have been a bit like that in the Blitz, coming out of the Blitz and like looking at the devastation and people dying and all that sort of stuff. So it's the similar emotions for some. I can't say because I don't remember.
But do you think there's a paradox now, because we did go through that being nice to everybody and what have you. And now we're almost back to where we were. And I've noticed it around some of the public events that I've worked at the football grounds. And there's a lot less patience with people.
Yeah.
You know, there's been an increase in violence in some sectors within the football world. And I think people have just become so impatient.
Yeah.
Whereas 2 years ago, when we were going through all the COVID issues, everybody, you know, if you wanted a cup of tea, if you ran out of anything, somebody would be throwing loo rolls over the fence. You know, that's how it got. But now we're back to almost our selfish selves.
And it does happen very quickly because it is very tribal. It is very, you know, what's everybody else doing? What am I getting involved in, etc.
Yeah, it is.
But I still think that even in those times, even in that, you know, there's times of when we're looking at, you know, wars around the world. We're looking at, you know, people still coming to this country on the back of dinghies, you know, risking their lives to come. You look at all those circumstances, and none of us have got all the answers for everything. And I don't ever, you know, tell people that I have. But you look at all those circumstances. You look at where we are. We still should remember that when all that is going on, there is still good stuff going on as well.
Yeah.
And to keep that balance, keep it in our minds that, you know, I hear things happening. You know, I'm not living in some ridiculous bubble of good news stories and, you know, it's all right for you because you don't go through. No, I'm constantly aware of things around me and you know, locally, nationally, you know, we're trying to change the atmospheres in Essex. There's another group I'm involved in, Transformation Essex and Love Essex, where we are trying to sort of say, look, there's some good news stories in Essex.
Yeah,
let's celebrate.
Yeah.
This is not all silliness and negativity. I mean, we're all aware of some shows that have been on that show Essex and Essex people in a very funny but poor light. At the end of the day, we have become a bit of a laughing stock. Well, I belong to these two groups that are saying, what do we love about our county? What's the history of our county? How do we redress the balance in changing the atmospheres in our local villages, in our towns, in our boroughs, in our cities? We've got 3 cities now. You know, how are we changing the atmosphere so that we can feel positive and feel? I go, you know, abroad on holiday, and somebody says, "Where are you from?" I'm from Essex, and I look forward to the day they go, "Oh, I hear that this is happening in Essex, and I've heard this good news story, and I see that you're doing this in Essex, and do you know what? I never knew that was where, you know, radio started. I never knew the history of that. Oh, God, the Mayflower. Oh, I never knew that was... Do you know, we've got some incredible rich history that we allow to forget because we've joined this other narrative of, like, looking down and feeling a bit silly about white socks, sandals, you know, dancing around handbags and, you know, the only way is Essex. That is all a giggle. But actually, if we embrace that and that becomes who we are and what we celebrate, we actually just join a negative narrative.
But you're absolutely right. I mean, you look at it, we've got the longest pier in Southend.
Still.
The Mayflower set sail was built in Harwich, set sail from Harwich and picked up the Pilgrim Fathers down the coast.
Exactly.
But it started here.
Exactly.
John Constable, one of the finest artists in the world of all time, was from Essex.
Exactly.
And it gets mopped
and
up.
then you start looking at art, you start looking at music.
Yeah.
You look at some of the music that's come out of this county. You look at some of the people that are of significance in their own areas of influence.
Yeah.
You know, you look at some politics. You look at some of the politicians we've got at the moment, whether you believe in their politics, whether you think they're useless or shooting themselves and so on. We've got a number of high-profile politicians currently in this county that live here. You know, you've got one just living just down the road. It was on the telly yesterday.
Yeah.
You know, so they are speaking into the life of the country and the nation, and they are from Essex.
Yeah.
You know, so we've got a lot to give thanks for in this county. So we're just trying to get that narrative going, and so I do that in a bit of my
So
spare
how did you
time.
get involved with Grenfell?
Grenfell God, that's where we started. And
That's
I
where we
completely
started.
forgot.
No, that's
Sorry,
all right.
Paul.
That's good. Don't be daft. It's
my
good.
mind rattled on
No,
there.
no,
And
no.
I forgot. So Grenfell is very much, so from a street pastor perspective, what we also do is those of us that want to volunteer to be on a call-out list to go to places of emergency need, that you can be on a list and you're on a call-out list. So I'm on that call-out list. I'm called a response pastor within the... So we are trained street pastors, but we also take on a little bit of extra tuition about, well, what would you do in emergency circumstances? Because, again, we're not the emergency services. We're not rushing into the inner cordons. What can we bring? What can we do? So Grenfell came at a time where I was available. So I got the call, Phil, we've got this going on. Would you mind being part of a team that can go and help the local community and the local church community start to deal with some of the effects for which Grenfell at that time. So I was there on day one, and day one is about all the other people that are now impacted by what is going on. So outside of the fact that the place is still burning, that the emergency services are still dealing with a horrendous situation, what about all the people that have been displaced? What about all the people that are in the community horrified at what's happening on their doorstep? What are we doing about all the bystanders and the spectators that come from a long way away? I mean, I was shocked at some people, hi, how are you? You okay? What you doing here? Oh, I'm from so-and-so, and I've travelled all the way here. And I'm like, do you really think it's appropriate, that you should be here? Because there's a lot of people here that, the emergency services are trying to deal with and help. And, do you think possibly you're adding to the problems, of needing water and being helped and all the rest of it. So,
and it was hot. It was a hot day, wasn't it?
It was incredibly hot.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we arrived. So my first team. So I ended up arriving, became the team leader on day one. Sent out, I think it's 4 groups of response passers. So we'd had quite a lot of people say, "Oh, we're available." So I think it was a group of anything between 12 and 14 that I sent out, four different directions, all into the community, all around, just trying to make sure that nobody was getting missed. So we were coming across people that were just sitting in gardens, on walls, and just lost, completely lost,
absolutely.
completely like, what is going? Still, the ash is still coming down. The place is still on fire. It was on fire for days. So we're looking up. This horrendous. There's still emergency activity. They're doing their best. You got things like T-wagons started to rock up for different organisations, that sort of stuff. So we were there, very emotional 4 days. I didn't realise.
I can imagine.
I didn't realise. So I was there for 4 days in the end. I mean, at the end of it, I sat on my couch. I can remember my wife came back from work, and I just wept, absolutely wept, like a baby. Because what I'd seen and what I'd experienced was absolutely horrific. The last time I'd wept like that was, when I was during the job and one of our colleagues died on a football pitch, in front of me, and that was horrendous. And I those uncontrollable tears, I just wept. And my children came in and they just sat on my lap and they just looked at Daddy as if saying something's not right. Just to see the sheer helplessness of people, and then the aftermath of people that wanted to rush in and help and they couldn't, and then the families and the friends turning up. There were day 4, people, family members walking around with posters of their loved ones. Has anybody seen this? And in your heart of hearts that that person was, if they're in there, they're no longer with us, and the family's clinging on to that last thread of hope, and then going to the wall where the names are getting posted, and then the screams and the prayers of people that was just coming out. It was horrendous. So
and you're talking about multi-faith as well, aren't you? These are not all Christian.
Absolutely.
You know, you've got every denomination under the sun.
Yeah. And one of the local mosques was doing an amazing. All their doors were open.
Yeah.
Local temple, the doors were open, and there was people. There was Khalsa Aid, which was another organisation. They turned up because they were. And the Sikhs were mobilised. They were bringing stuff, and they were bringing like soup wagons, and like they were making food and just giving it to anybody. There was no questions about.
Didn't matter where you were from.
No. Who you were and whatever. If you were there in the queue, then you're indicating I just need some help. So amazing. The amazing generosity. Again, looking at the spirit we talked about earlier over COVID, the spirit and the local community, and then outside the local with clothes and stuff. They were awash with clothes and things for the displaced families within about 3 days. They couldn't cope with any more deliveries. And there's a big logistical thing then that needs to kick in to sort out, the bits and pieces, some of it inappropriate, some of it just needed chucking away. But the vast, vast majority of people being generous with their stuff that they want to, what can I do?
Fabulous.
Oh, I can send some stuff that I no longer need, So I just think that in all of this and these conversations make me think that, they're in communities, there is such a good spirit that is out there that we just need to celebrate it and share that a bit more than we do, and not get downtrodden by some of the more negative narratives that are going on around us. And Grenfell was one where I could be part of a good team that were trying to do some stuff. We try and do that, and COVID has brought us food banks and the acceleration of food banks, community superstores, all that sort of stuff, where we can all do a little bit just to keep the good narratives going, share the good news stories.
And because you work within the food banks as well, don't you? You help out in the food banks and whatever.
Yeah. So during COVID, I helped the expansion of our local food bank and got it into more fit for purpose premises. It was in a small cupboard at the beginning of COVID, and then the influx of donations, the influx of need, the more people that needed help meant that the whole food bank thing just expanded. So I was involved in that. Now moved to running a community supermarket in Langdon, which is about we've received some money from the Essex County Council to open it up. It's in the middle of food banks and supermarket. It's a low cost.
Right.
You still got to purchase, but it's all at very, very reduced rates.
Right. Okay.
To help people that are on, that are struggling, because obviously COVID has hit us, but now the whole thing about utilities bills and the price of living, there's a lot of people out there and a lot of need. So there are different ways that we can use, different skills, different finances, different intentional models to help people that are in those situations.
And of course, Billericay Town. Are you still involved at Billericay Town Football Club?
I am still a football pastor at the football club. I haven't been for a little while. I've moved house over the last few months, and what we do in the community supermarket and the street passes, I just find that sometimes just some of the things that so I also like being part of the walking football team at Billericay Town. Well, I haven't played, and I haven't played for months, but I'd like to get back to that at some stage.
I interviewed Paul Nichols last week, who's a dog handler, and he's got Parkinson's now, and he does walking football.
That's right. I saw that on your
brilliant. Absolutely brilliant.
Yeah. It's a walking football for those of us that are getting a little bit older, but we've always loved the game. We've loved playing it, but we can no longer run and without straining something. To be part of that whole culture and still be able to kick a ball around with rules, with scoring goals, with the camaraderie. I've met so many new people as well that I wouldn't have met unless I went down there with me Astro boots on and me shorts and everything. It's great. It's great fun.
Has there ever been a time, Phil, where you've questioned your faith, though? I mean, you're very passionate about it, and it saved your life. Let's face it. But has there ever been a time where you thought, actually, is there a God out there?
I don't think that has been my question. My question is sometimes is in my frustrations of when injustices do occur, and then you see things happen, and then I think my question is more, God, where are you? You know, one of my sillier questions is, you know, God, has this caught you out? You know, on your watch, did you know that this was going to happen?
Yeah.
You know, or why have you allowed this to happen? You know, it's a bigger thing. You know, when you look at
a tsunami or something like that.
Do you know the complete? And for me, I think it goes back to the wider bad things happen to good people.
Yeah.
And I know that's a very childish, very superficial thought, but if you do start to believe in, you know, good versus evil and Star Wars and, you know, all that rest of that, you know, you think of it like that, and you think, well, you know, good will prevail in our looking at things in a big strategical way. You know, take a step back and think of it and I can't think of it on a global scale, because I go to other countries that are a completely different culture to mine. It takes a while to understand the culture and the life of things and the expectations of the people that are around. So that's difficult for any one cultural individual to go and understand the whole cultures of other areas. But I think in myself, in my deep self, I've believed in a creator God, in order in the world. I think I've always believed that, and I don't question, like, you know, getting it real down to finer detail. You know, just looking at the human body as an example, the complexities of the human body, how it works. You know, how oxygenated blood goes around, and I am not, as I said to you several times, an academic, a biologist, all the rest of it, but I sit back in wonder at the human body. Then I see other things. Then I see other examples in nature. I see other things happening in the world. And mentally, when you start to go down that line, and faith is about not having all the answers lined up. If you could do all of that, it's just an academic cranial exercise. For me, therefore, you wouldn't need faith. You wouldn't need faith in something that you don't understand, or is unseen, or is in existence and you don't quite see it. I don't know if I'm making sense, but do you know, the whole point of a religious way of thinking, although religion is, for those people within Christianity, is a bad term, because religion is all the rules and all the expectations that humans have put on expressing their, you know, because we are creatures of order. So to put order together within a faith, you end up demonstrating it. You know, this is how we're going to organise it. You know, we're going to meet on a Sunday morning. This is the building. We're going to have somebody that leads, somebody that does this, somebody that does that, somebody that takes the collections. You know, somebody needs to look after the fabric of the building. Somebody needs to look after the kids. Somebody got to do the teas. Do you know, we in our order have put religion in the way of the purest sense. So like I've said to you, I don't try and convince too many people by words. I prefer, for the way I live my life and the things that I try and do, try and tell as much of the story as possible. Then if somebody actually wants to talk to me about matters of faith, I'm happy to do that, but I'm not somebody that will rock up and thrust it in your face. So I very gently, if somebody wants to talk to me about, you know, a circumstance, or, you know, what do you think about this, or what does the Bible say about that, then I can engage with that. I'm not saying I'm not somebody with no answers. I haven't got all the answers. So I'm just somebody that's trying to do my best to do my bit, to follow. I fundamentally, at my core, believe that the world was created, that humans were not a mistake. They weren't as a result of an accident, a calamity, a big bang, or genetics, or, you know, whatever's the strongest, the survival of the fittest, and things like that. I don't believe that. So I believe that there is an intentionality around who we are and what we're about. What is the meaning of life? You know, how are we? I think the fundamentally what we are made for is to be in relationship with other human beings, and also to be in relationship with the Creator being. So there's all that sort of stuff that goes along in my mind. So I don't think I've ever questioned it. What I do have questions about is the circumstances where I see, you know, somebody get hurt that didn't deserve it. When I see, you know, atrocities happen across the world, because at the moment, you know, we have to be cautious, because we are fed a very Western narrative through our Western media, and we see what's going on in the world through an interpretation that is given to us sometimes by different organisations or different structures that are paid for in a different way, or are politicised in a certain way, or even, you know, in a religious sort of way. You know, what is the truth of things that are happening around the world? I mean, you watch different news channels, you'll get a different perception than watching BBC and ITV all the time. You know, you watch Sky, you watch Al Jazeera. You know, what are they saying? Well, what's their narrative about this? And you think, oh my goodness, well, we're not even receiving that news in this country. So there is always stuff going on. But I'm not a great, massive alternative thinking theorist. I just try and keep it very simple. I try and lead the life that I'm supposed to live. And I do sometimes, you know, think, right, okay, just remember, if your car crash was a moment in time where you were saved rather than happened to survive, if you were saved for a reason, try and work out what that reason was. Try and use your time wisely. Use the skills that you've been given wisely, the connections that you've been given. I mean, a lot of people call it the circle of your influence. So that, you know, my influence is the people that are around me, the people I brush shoulders with, the people that I chat to, the people that I help, the people that I say, you know, do you think that's the best way of doing that? Because actually, if you did it like this and like that you might get a bit more benefit from your dollar. Oh, that's a good idea, Phil. You know, and we can speak into those situations with the lives and the skills that we are being given.
Fantastic. Well, Phil, before I conclude this interview, is there anything you'd like to add? Or
is this an interview? Well, I'd forgotten.
Yeah, no, I
thought we were just chatting.
It's a lovely conversation, mate, and I've thoroughly enjoyed it. And you've brought a tear to my eye, and for that I'm really grateful. But is there anything else you'd like to say before we stop this? No, I just, you know, it's quite cathartic to have these opportunities and it's quite a privilege, you know, in the busyness of life, just to sit here with you and just to reminisce like that. I'm going to be, I don't know how long we've been going on, but you know, this is probably too long for people to bear to listen to. So, you know, I don't know what you're going to do with it once it's done. But just the opportunity, just maybe to reflect for this short period of time in our lives, just to keep our eyes on telling a good news story and keeping things, you know, celebrating the things around us that we know that we want to continue and we want to encourage, rather than getting brought down by the negative atmospheres and the narrative that just says, do you know what, you shouldn't sit by and put up with that because you've got rights in this and you've got a voice and all the rest of it. Yes, we have, but think cautiously about wanting everybody to hear your opinion if it's not been asked for, and then when you deliver it, just try and be reasonable and balanced and take care of other people's opinions and views as well. Absolutely. Well, on that note, mate, I'm going to press that red button. Thank you, mate, very much for your time today. It's been a privilege. I'll go and put the kettle on. Hey, shall we?